There are images that, once seen, are impossible to forget. A bird perched on a branch, its wings folded, its head bowed in eternal sleep. A bat hanging upside down, frozen in a terrifying silence. At first glance, they look like statues, masterpieces carved from gray stone by an ancient artist. You can see every feather. You can trace the delicate curve of every bone. But these are not carvings, and they are not made of stone. These were once living, breathing creatures. They had heartbeats. They hunted. They flew. Now, they are calcified monuments to their own death. Welcome to the shores of Lake Natron in northern Tanzania. This is a place where the water doesn't just drown you, it preserves you. A place where the chemistry is so hostile, it blurs the line between a lake and a vat of acid. For centuries, legends whispered that this water possessed a curse. They said a single touch would turn flesh into stone. Today, we are going to strip away the myth to reveal a scientific reality that is far more terrifying. To understand the lethality of this place, you have to understand the violence that created it. We are standing deep within the East African Rift Valley. This is a geological scar where the African continent is slowly tearing itself apart. Millions of years ago, the Earth collapsed here. It created a massive, blisteringly hot basin that sits far below sea level. Lake Natron acts as the drain for this entire region. But it is not a normal lake. It is what geologists call an endorheic basin. In simple terms, it is a trap. Most lakes have rivers that flow in and rivers that flow out, flushing water to the ocean. Natron is different. Water flows in from mineral-rich hot springs and the Owasso Ingiro River. But it has absolutely nowhere to go. There is no outlet, no escape. Trapped under the relentless equatorial sun, where air temperatures frequently exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the water has only one way out: evaporation. But when water evaporates, it leaves its ghost behind. Every mineral, every salt, every chemical compound that washes down from the mountain stays in the basin. Over thousands of years, the water leaves, but the salt remains, concentrating, thickening, turning the lake into a chemical brine that is more similar to ammonia than it is to fresh water. But evaporation is only half the story. The true source of the poison looms just to the south. Casting a long, dark shadow over the lake is the perfect conical silhouette of Ol Doinyo Lengai. In the language of the Maasai, it means the mountain of God. But scientifically, it is a monster. This is the only active volcano on the entire planet that erupts nitrocarbonatite lava. Unlike the hot, red, silicate lava we see in Hawaii, the lava here is strange. It is much cooler, only about 500 degrees Celsius. In the daylight, it flows like black motor oil, but its chemical composition is unique. It is incredibly rich in sodium and potassium carbonates. Essentially, this mountain is erupting washing soda. When the rains come, they wash this white, powdery volcanic ash down the slopes. It dissolves instantly. It creates a caustic sludge that flows directly into the lake. This volcano is the engine that keeps Lake Natron deadly. It constantly replenishes the alkalinity, ensuring that the water never becomes safe. So what happens if you touch it? The internet is full of stories about animals turning to stone instantly. That is a myth. The reality is a slow, agonizing chemical burn. We measure acidity and alkalinity on the pH scale. Pure water is 7. Seawater is 8. Lake Natron consistently measures a pH of 10.5. In the shallow lagoons, it can spike to 12. This is almost as caustic as industrial oven cleaner or bleach. If a human were to swim here, the high alkalinity would cause a process called saponification. The chemicals literally attack the oils and fats in your skin. It turns them into soap. It strips away your body's protective barriers. If you had a cut, a scratch, or even sensitive skin, the pain would be blinding. It would feel like fire. For small animals, birds, insects, bats, falling into this water is a death sentence. The dense, viscous water traps them. They drown. But because the water is so basic, the bacteria that normally cause decomposition cannot survive here. The lake sterilizes the body. Instead of rotting, the creature is pickled. The sodium carbonate penetrates the flesh. It binds to the proteins. It draws out the moisture. This is the exact same chemical process the ancient Egyptians used to mummify their pharaohs. But here, there are no priests, only the sun and the salt. As the dry season arrives and the water recedes, the preserved bodies are left on the shore. They dry out. They harden. They are encased in a crust of salt. And they remain there, perfectly preserved accidental mummies, staring out over the landscape that killed them. It is a process that creates an illusion of immortality, but it is an immortality born of violence. Walking the shores of Lake Natron feels like walking on a graveyard on another planet. The ground crunches like broken glass. The air smells of sulfur and heat. It is a landscape that seems to reject biology entirely, a place where nothing should be able to survive. And yet, if you look past the salt statues, if you look out into the center of the red water, you will see something impossible. Movement, life, millions of lives. Because in nature, one creature's poison is another creature's paradise. And the story of Lake Natron is not just about how it kills. It is about the one incredible species that has looked at this chemical apocalypse and decided to call it home. If part 1 was the story of death, part 2 is the impossible story of life. The transition is jarring. From the silent, calcified shores, we look out to the center of the lake, and we see an explosion of noise and color. A shifting, living island of pink. These are the lesser flamingos, and this is the great paradox of the Rift Valley. The most hostile chemical environment in East Africa is also the site of one of the largest congregations of birds on the planet. Every year, more than 2.5 million of them descend upon these toxic shores. To put that number in perspective, that represents nearly 75% of the entire global population of this species. Think about that risk. 3/4 of a species relies on this single, deadly location for their survival. If you are a lesser flamingo, survival does not begin with flight. It begins with a gamble. They do not come here for the water. They come here for the timing. Lake Natron is not stable. It is a living, breathing entity. It expands with the rains. It shrinks with the heat. If the birds arrive too early, the water is too high, and there is no ground to nest on. If they arrive too late, the water is too low. The salt islands connect to the mainland, and they create bridges for predators. Each year, millions of flamingos make the same calculation, and each year, they bet their genetic future on it. So the question is unavoidable. Why? Why bring your fragile eggs and your helpless chicks to a place that can strip skin from bone? The answer is ruthless pragmatism. In the wild Serengeti, which lies just to the west, danger is everywhere. Lions, leopards, hyenas, jackals. The savanna is a battlefield. For these predators, a colony of 2 million ground-nesting birds looks like an endless feast. But Lake Natron offers a defense mechanism that no savanna can provide. It offers a moat. Between the predator and the prey lies kilometers of shallow, caustic mud. For a hyena or a jackal, crossing this mud is impossible. First, there is the physical danger. The mud acts like chemical quicksand. It is sticky. It is topped with a brittle crust of salt that breaks under the weight of a heavy mammal. Second, the chemical burn. As the predator struggles in the mud, the alkaline sludge grinds into their paws. It attacks their sensitive bellies. Remember, this is pH 10.5. The pain would be immediate, and it would be unbearable. The lake essentially puts up a wall of fire. The flamingos build their nests on the ephemeral salt islands in the very center of the lake. From the shore, the hungry predators can see them. They can hear them, but they cannot reach them. Once the safety of the fortress is established, the chicks hatch. They enter a world of extremes. But how does a bird with thin, delicate legs stand in water that burns human skin? Evolution has equipped them with a biological hazmat suit. If you were to look at a flamingo's leg under a microscope, you would see that the skin is not soft. It is tough, it is leathery, and incredibly thick. Even more importantly, it is covered in specialized, durable scales. These scales create an impermeable barrier against the caustic soda. They prevent the chemicals from making contact with living tissue. But external armor is not enough. You also have to survive the internal chemistry. Fresh water here is scarce. The birds often have to drink from springs that are brackish and salty. In a human, drinking this water would lead to dehydration and kidney failure within days. The flamingo, however, has a desalination plant built right into its head. They possess specialized salt glands located in their nasal cavity. These glands work tirelessly. They filter excess salt from the bloodstream, and they excrete it out through the nostrils. They can drink water that would kill a cow, process it, and expel the poison, maintaining a perfect internal balance. We have talked about protection, but a fortress is useless without food. Why is the lake red? The color comes from billions upon billions of microscopic organisms called spirulina. Most life forms cannot handle the extreme salinity of Lake Natron. Their cells would collapse, but spirulina loves it. It thrives in the warm, alkaline water. It uses the abundant carbon dioxide from the volcano to photosynthesize like a machine. To protect itself from the intense radiation of the African sun, the algae produces a red pigment. This algae is the primary food source for the lesser flamingo, and this reveals the final secret of the lake. We think of flamingos as pink, but they are not. They are born gray. The pink color is a dye. As they filter feed on the spirulina, their bodies absorb the red pigments. The color is deposited into their feathers and skin. They are literally dyeing themselves from the inside out. Without the toxic water of Lake Natron, the algae wouldn't grow. Without the algae, the flamingo wouldn't be pink. The lake of fire gives them their safety, their food, and even their identity. It is a perfect system, a delicate, intricate dance between geology, chemistry, and biology. But it is terrifyingly fragile. Lake Natron is one of the last true wildernesses left on Earth, but it is under siege. The same chemicals that preserve the dead make this lake a gold mine for human industry. Soda ash is a key ingredient in making glass and detergents. Proposals to build massive extraction plants threaten to drain the water. If the water level drops, the chemical moat dries up. The islands connect to the land, and the predators walk right in. A single season of disturbance could wipe out a generation of birds. And since they breed almost exclusively here, the collapse of Lake Natron could mean the extinction of the species in the wild. Lake Natron teaches us a hard lesson about the definition of habitable. We look for life on other planets, imagining what kind of creatures could survive in hostile alien environments. But we don't need to look at Mars. We just need to look at Tanzania. Here, in the shadow of the mountain of God, life dances in the poison. Lake Natron is a place of duality. It is a tomb that preserves the dead for eternity. And it is a cradle that nurtures millions of new lives every year. Beautiful, deadly, essential. This is the story of the lake that turns animals to stone, and the life that refuses to be petrified.